So I just read over your consultation real quick. You had aggressive put on there, make sure I was reading this correctly. General behavior issues, obedience. Okay, and he's currently on fluoxetine and trazodone.
Yeah.
Okay, so is the aggression dog aggression or human?
Well, it was dog, and just this week he's snapped at a couple people.
Okay.
He does go to a dog daycare, and he snapped at a person there, which he's never done. He's been there for over a year.
Okay.
And that was the first. And then my sister is visiting, and he snapped at her. And again, it was, a very, he's, we've had some issues with him with other dogs. We have 2 other dogs, so we're very doggy at our house. Initially, it was all fine. They got along well. I wouldn't say we have an older male, kind of the females in the middle, and then him. When we brought him home, I wouldn't say like the other male and he loved each other, but it was kind of like civil. They could hang out in the same space. They didn't really play together much, but they weren't at each other's throats. That's gotten progressively worse over this year.
Okay.
To the point where we really just kind of separate them, and that's not tenable. Yeah. And it's really unfair to the old guy. Belvidere is a rescue. He's about 4.5 now. He came to us when he was roughly, 3.5. He was, from all accounts, he has chronic pancreatitis, which makes, it challenging. He doesn't, he's very specific on what he eats and stuff like that. But when he was surrendered, from what the rescue place we got him from could tell, is he was basically in a crate in the basement of the house where he lived for the better part of a couple of years. So he will not go in a crate. He will not separate himself from us. He's very bonded to me. He gets along fine with my daughter and husband. We've never had any issues with us, but it's definitely he's very comfortable with the 3 of us, but I think all the isolation we've had over the last year has made some of his weirdness with strangers and just other situations that much more acute. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And he's, and he's a lot of dog, and it really worries me that, I don't feel like we have a good handle on him, and I don't have a good sense of what's going to set him off and what's not, and it's just, something we want to really address and make sure that we're not, he's not a hazard to other people and other dogs.
Okay.
So.
Does he have dog reactivity?
Somewhat. He's real specific, I would say, with other dogs. He's really very uncomfortable with other males. He gets along okay at daycare with other females and smaller dogs. Dogs that are sort of roughly his size that are male kind of freak him out, or bigger. He really, they kind of have him in a smaller group, so he's not in the general dog population of dogs his size, so I think they kind of mitigate that. But yeah, so he can be fine or he can be kind of crazy. It's a bit of a, he's just a little more, he's easily set off, I think is the thing, and it's kind of unclear sometimes to know what's going to make him react.
Is he currently on the medication?
Yeah. Okay.
So it's just something you give to him every day?
Every day.
Okay.
Yeah.
The incident with the handler at the daycare, do you know what happened there?
My husband was bringing him in, and there was another dog kind of at the, handoff, and was kind of wound up, and I think that sort of, set him off. And then when the guy came out to take his leash, he kind of snapped at his hand. And, that was just, it's never really happened like that before. He's usually pretty calm, and he's pretty comfortable there, so it was strange. And that person, he was then kind of under control, and it was evidently okay, but, it was surprising to everybody that he did that.
Sure. How long has he been going there?
He's been going there for daycare for probably, since they started doing it again during the pandemic, so I'd say last summer.
Okay.
And he's boarded there. He's there a lot, so it's not like it's, it's not a new place to him, and this was not a new person.
So he was familiar with the handler too.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. So your husband shows up to drop him off. There's another dog there that's more kind of higher energy or wound up.
Yeah.
So then that kind of puts him on edge, and then the other handler comes out to grab him.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, what was, in the second instance, was your sister?
My sister.
Okay.
And she's staying at our house, and I had gone to drop my daughter off somewhere, and while I was gone, he was, on the couch in the family room, as my sister was, with a big L-shaped couch. And he just kind of came up to her and just kind of nipped her in the hand, unprovoked. I mean, it was very, he was kind of staring at her the whole time, kind of, who are you, what are you doing in my space, No growling, no kind of, and that was kind of what was weirdest about that, was there was no seeming instigation of it, no reason why he would react like that. We have had people, obviously this year it's been weird because, you really haven't had people over.
Yeah.
Again, when we first got him, we first were doing a foster to adopt, so we got him shortly before Christmas, 2 Christmases ago, I guess it would be.
Okay, so
Christmas 2019.
Okay.
Pre-pandemic. And he was fine with people coming over. We had a Christmas party, he was the only dog, the other dogs are terrible around food, so they were up in their crate hanging out. He was milling around, being totally cool with 25 people in the house. He was fine on Christmas dinner, he was fine at, we had people over New Year's, he was great. And then, the pandemic hit and not a lot of socializing, no socializing. The only people that have been in our house since then, since my sister came, was my brother-in-law and niece were here in the summer. And he was fine with them. So again, it's kind of this weird, that's been obviously a long time, and a lot of alone time with us has happened in the meantime. But, he's not if people walk by the front of our house, he's not the dog we have who's barking and going crazy.
Okay.
He's,
Interesting.
It's just people in his space, he likes to ride in the car, he'll stick his head out the window, he doesn't bark at other dogs on the street or people. He's kind of it's very specific to, it seems like, the house. My husband thinks it's very specific to me a lot of times, but I wasn't there in either of these snapping incidents, so I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, your sister, he had met before?
No.
No, that was the first time. Okay.
Yeah.
So she comes over. She has a seat, and he's staring at her. About how long into that did the nip happen?
She arrived that morning, and that happened in the evening. He had gone to daycare during the day.
Okay, so then he comes home and
he comes home, and maybe a couple hours after he came home, this happened.
And then during that time frame, he was just staring at her, or like suspicious?
Kind of, yeah, or he would kind of keep an eye out for her, and was very this morning we were all down there, and she was there again, and I had a drag lead on him, but I didn't have him held.
Okay.
And he was just snoozing, and now he seems fine.
Okay.
But but it was touch and go. I mean, we're a dog family, so my sister was that she wasn't doing anything to bug him. It was really surprising.
And since everything happening, how often would you say you have guests over now?
Well, we really haven't, honestly.
Okay.
I mean, we'd like to start, but
now
I'm a little leery. Yeah.
Okay. So those are the 2 things. And then reactivity-wise, you said it's kind of it's selective. It's not consistent.
It's I can take him on walks, and he's not great on a leash, but he's not terrible.
Okay.
He doesn't really. I mean, a lot of times what he'll do when a dog walks past him, I'll take him onto the parkway, and he'll sit and watch the dog go by. And he usually doesn't do much unless the dog barks at him, and then he'll kind of do the same. I don't want to play with other dogs just because I don't know what they're going to be like. I don't know what he's going to be like, but he will watch a dog. 9 times out of 10, he just watches the dog go by.
Okay.
And hopefully the person doesn't let their dog run up to him.
Yeah.
So.
And then
honestly, he looks a little intimidating, so most people don't.
Yeah. He's a good-looking guy, though.
Yeah.
I
think so.
No, he's got a good.
He's my baby, and I'm probably too indulgent with him, so I know I need to work on that.
Is he a boxer mix?
We think we don't know. I mean, I've never done the DNA. I mean, again, since he's a rescue, we don't know. I mean, I'd say it's possible he's got a little staffy in him too, maybe. But
yeah, I can see that too.
Yeah,
but
I think maybe 3/4 boxer, 1/4 staffy. Who knows? Because the body seems boxery, but.
Yeah, no, he's got a good build. They did a good job on the crop. He's got a nice.
I wish he didn't have the cropped ears, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah, no, he's a good-looking guy.
Yeah. And he's smart. I think he would really. I started some training with him before the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And I probably should have kept up more with it on the Zoom stuff because he really wants that. I think he's a dog who needs kind of a job, if you will, and he's got a really high energy level. I mean, he goes, when he's at daycare, they have him like walking several times a day. They've got him on a treadmill. He does a pool every once in a while. I mean, he's a very high energy dog. So I think, and he's, of our 3 dogs, the smartest. And I think he would do well with more mental stimulation. So maybe that's part of the problem. I don't know.
Okay. Last thing is, you said there's tension between him and one of the residing dogs?
Yes.
Okay, so could you just reiterate that?
Sure. Wallace is our oldest dog. He's about 11. Okay. He's a mutt. He's probably about 55 pounds. He's kind of a weirdo too. We've had him since about 5 months old. He is, he's just, I mean, again, initially it was just kind of like they just kind of kept to each other, kept to their own space. He's gotten very resourceful, and he's gotten very, guarding of like food. The kitchen is a definite like zone where they've gotten into it. So Belvidere is very, I don't know. I think there's a lot of territorialism that comes in, and a lot of, who's dominant kind of stuff. I don't know. But again, for a long time, it was like, they just kind of occupied the same space and ignored each other. And now it's like anytime they see each other, he'll go after him.
He starts it?
He starts it.
Okay.
And Wallace will engage. I mean, Wallace isn't giving in, and Wallace doesn't let him.
Yeah.
So it's worrisome because, I mean, when he locks on, it's, it's scary.
Okay. Has it ever escalated into like a full-on physical fight?
Yeah.
Were you able to break them up?
We were able to break them up, but it was not like, Belvy's got a few scars from the last time it happened.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So that was, Wallace got in a few digs, and so it was, and yeah, it was scary. So that was really the precursor. That was the start of it. Like, this doesn't work anymore. We've got to work on this for both of their sakes.
Okay. And then
he's calmer here than I would expect him to be, so that's good.
Yeah, so that's why, like, I'm looking at him and everything you're describing, I'm not seeing it, but it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah.
And then you said you were doing Zoom training?
We tried it, it just didn't work real well.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the problem is, especially when we started having the reactivity and the aggression, it's like, he's aggressive with other people coming in, he's aggressive with these dogs. I just, I didn't know how the Zoom thing would work with, so I should have done more about it.
Was it food-based training? Was it food-based training?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is a real challenge for him because, first of all, he's not very food motivated.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, he's like he didn't eat this morning, he didn't want to eat. He's like my supermodel, he doesn't eat very much.
Okay.
So.
And in terms of like obedience, like what would you like to achieve with that?
I mean, I would like to know, like, I would like to be able to walk with him without worrying about it. I would like to know that if somebody comes over, I can put him in a downstay and he's gonna not, jump up and, decide he needs to defend his territory. I mean, kind of I want to set some boundaries for him and have him understand what those boundaries and the expectations are. I feel like I've been all over the map with him.
Sure.
And I think he's a dog who needs some set boundaries. So, and I think, it's like having a kid. I know this, I just didn't do it,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the basic thing. I just want him to have some, reliable, good manners. And I want to get to the point where we can, get back to at least some degree of, civility with the other dog. I mean, I don't care if they're best buddies, but I just want to be able to occupy the same space and not have, full-on dog fight.
Yeah. So of everything you listed, that's actually the hardest.
I know.
Is the 2 dogs.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's to some degree, it's like if I can, even if it's to the point where I know if I have him with me in another part of the house and my husband's back with the other dog out, just knowing that, like, I don't care if they're separated, I just don't want our old dog to be stuck in a crate for hours on end. That's just not fair.
I get you. So I'll tackle that one first, just to give you an idea of the realities of it. And I've worked with a number of multi-dog households where the dogs start fighting, and then whenever they see each other, it's just constant fighting. And we're able to stop it.
Okay.
I actually have 2 dogs right now that fight within the home. They're fine now, but the owners are on it.
Yeah.
Like you know, it's kind of like being a parent with two kids that don't get along,
Yeah.
but except with kids, like we punch and kick, right?
Yeah.
And shove and push, whereas dogs bite, and that's
Yeah.
where things get dangerous, because obviously it can do much more harm,
Yeah.
and it's much more expensive.
Yes.
So, when it comes to the two dogs fighting, one, like you said, we just want coexistence, right? You don't start anything, the dog doesn't start anything. This guy would be the easier one of the two because if you go forward with training, you're going to have a lot more control over him.
Mm-hmm.
However, you still would have to set boundaries for the other dog.
Yeah.
So like, let's say this guy is, you know, minding his business, but then you see the other dog becoming tense, you have to correct that dog.
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, he goes, well, I'm holding
Mm-hmm.
my shit, but this dog is now antagonizing.
Yeah.
I'm going to do something about it, and that just creates more conflict.
Sure.
And you don't need to do training with the other dog.
Okay.
You just have to be willing to correct that dog.
Which we are.
Okay, because you know you said 11-year-old dog and stuff, and what happens is with the seniors and or the little dogs or the puppies, when we talk about correcting them, people usually aren't comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's a smaller dog, they're like, oh, he's only 8 pounds. I'm like, yeah, but another dog would bite that dog
Mm-hmm.
and wouldn't care about the size. They don't go, oh, we're 8 pounds, so I'm gonna
Right, I don't have
excuse
to
you.
worry about you, yeah.
Yeah, they go, I bite you because this is what we do to each other, right?
Right.
Size doesn't matter, so, and neither does age.
Yeah.
I have another client right now, very similar, and I was like, you have to correct the older dog because the older dog's actually who's starting the problem
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I thought it was this dog. I'm like, no. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's the other dog.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, and what happens is this dog starts something, then it becomes a fight.
Totally.
And then if they're willing to fight over
We
it.
always talk about it like Wallace, who's the older guy. He starts it, and this guy's going to finish it every
Mhm.
single time.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and we're very comfortable correcting Wallace. He's you know, he's a handful too. I
Yeah.
mean, he's a little more of the like, I'll bark at you for no reason. I'm
Okay,
gonna be
sure.
so, and that sets him off. He's you know,
Sure.
he's a little noise sensitive, I would say.
Sure.
So-
So what can happen is, the way I would see this kind of playing out is we get him to a good place.
Mm-hmm.
If Wallace were to bark, he shouldn't just trigger.
Yeah.
Because he's more like kind of passive, and then it gives you time to correct him. Ideally, you would correct Wallace before there even is a bark, right? So
Yeah.
if you see it, if you even think it's going to happen,
Yeah.
you correct anyways, because it's
Yeah.
better to avoid it, prevent it, than to see it
That makes
and then
sense.
see what happens.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's that part, and then it's just whenever they were to be together, if they were to ever be together,
Mm-hmm.
they would just have to be aware. Okay, who's where, who's doing what, this and that, any signs of tension.
Yeah.
Very easy when clients see a lot of progress that they become complacent
Mm-hmm.
and they think they're kind of back to before the fight happened, which in my experience is not really a thing.
Yeah.
Like dogs will, like you said, they will finish it. And I've walked into homes with dead dogs,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Yeah, that's honestly that is my fear, and you know, I feel like my big thing with him is, you know, he went through a lot. He bounced around to a lot of houses, and the adoptions didn't work, and I can see why. You know, now that I know him a lot better, I mean, he's a handful, and you know, I don't want to set him up to fail, and I feel like we've kind of put him in a really bad situation to succeed. You know, so we want to do what we can to walk that back.
Yeah. So, so when it comes to that, that would be the only thing is you just have to be willing to be fair.
Sure.
You know, age, size does not dictate whether or not the dog is corrected or not. The next thing would be the obedience stuff is easy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, obedience is mechanical stuff. It's always behavior stuff that's more difficult.
Yeah.
You know, I've been doing this for 10 years, so like my eye for reading dog behavior is really, really good. Whereas the average dog owner may not see something as quickly, or they might not even see it as being something like bad, you know?
Yeah.
So the healing stuff or leash walking stuff, not a problem. Stationary control stuff, not a problem. Oh, people coming in. So the two incidences, one with the handler, one with your sister. The handler one makes sense to me in the sense of like where he gets edgy, like you said, depending on the dog. Not uncommon that a dog won't like over the top energy. So you probably get uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And daycares are typically, you know, it's rushed, so you better get your dog, okay, come
Yeah.
grab the next one. So it's probably a really quick occurrence, and that's probably why he did the kind of correctional nip. Because if he was gonna bite someone,
Oh yeah.
it would have happened. So.
And that's pretty much what the handler said. Like,
Yeah.
if he meant it, I would have, you know, it would have been different.
Yeah, for sure.
But still.
Yeah, I mean, it's unsettling, right? But at
Yeah.
the same time, like, I get it, and I go, okay, because it's kind of like people. We have people that have like anger issues, and a little thing will set them to a 10.
Yeah.
You know, and then for most people, a little thing sets up to like a 1. And same thing with dogs. Some dogs, it can be a little thing, but they come back at a 10.
Yeah.
So when I heard that situation, I'm like, okay, that was an appropriate correction, right? To us, it's not acceptable, but in his world, it totally is.
Kind of understandable, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I'm like, okay, I get that. The sister one makes sense as well, because pandemic, not as many people coming over. You said it's been, it's still not been a lot. It was the first time she'd ever been there. She came home from daycare, and he's like, who's this person in the house? And then he was there for like a couple of hours going like, okay, like, who are you? And eventually just said like, you make me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right? But again, if you really intended on harming, it would have been most likely much, much earlier.
Yeah.
But then also you would have had like a totally different conversation with me just now.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so all those things, although they're not good, are technically good because of where he took it.
Okay.
The gap in time before he took it there.
Yeah.
Because it gives you a lot of wiggle room to address things.
Gotcha.
Okay? So, because I hear all sorts of crazy stuff. A lot of different, places that dogs will go and things like that, how quickly they go there. So that's why I kind of take what you're telling me and I'm putting it against all the stuff that I've come across. So yeah, so that makes sense to me and it can be addressed, so that's not a problem either. So I'm assuming you did research on us and how we train and everything like that, you probably collar and all that. Okay, cool. So I'll explain how this process works and then I'll give you an idea like length of time and cost.
Okay.
The way I approach things is I only teach what you're going to need and what you're going to use. Because if you're not going to use it, there's no point in actually like going over it, right?
Yeah.
We always prioritize behavior because behavior is very important.
Yes.
Behavior is what takes time. Behavior is what takes education, and then for you practicing and all that stuff. The obedience stuff, like I said, is easy because it's mechanical. Hey, I called you, get over here, put your butt down, go to your bed. So that's easier to shape. The behavioral stuff of like getting two dogs to coexist where there was once tension is where things get complicated.
Sure.
Okay. So I'll go over the remote collar first. Are you familiar with the technology at all? So e-collar, have you ever been to a physical therapist or chiropractor?
Yeah.
Have you ever had STEM, the machine that moves muscles?
Yeah.
That's an e-collar.
Okay.
Okay. So a lot of people, when they think of it, they think they're shocking their dog or they think they're electrocuting the dog. That's not the case.
Okay.
It's electric but not electricity is how I describe it. So it's a miniaturized TENS unit. All it does is cause a muscle contraction. And there's two probes that would make contact with this neck. So if you were to move use the e-collar, you'd see this here moving. If you were to put on your palm, you'd see like your fingers move. If you put on your muscle, you'd see like your arm or whatever, your muscle twitch.
And is the idea just to kind of distract them, or?
So dogs are physical animals. So let's go back to the handler, right? For whatever reason, in that situation, he was overwhelmed, he was uncomfortable, and he did a nip, saying like either back off or like, hey, I'm overwhelmed right now, and this has to go somewhere. So he's using physicality to express that. Okay. Same thing with your sister, right? I'm uncomfortable with you. It's been a couple of hours. Where'd you come from? I come home from daycare and you're already here.
Right.
Ooh, I'm gonna let you know that I'm uncomfortable, right? So e-collar is our means of, it's like a bite on a button, is how I describe it. Is it allows us to teach the dog what not to do, but also allows us to teach the dog what to do.
Okay.
Okay? So a lot of people talk about it, or describe it as like, tap, like, hey, get your attention. And that's true to a degree. But at the same time, I want the dog to be a bit concerned by it. Okay? Because if there's no concern, it doesn't mean anything. Okay? So if you're always using the collar at a level where it's just enough to get his attention, you're going to be using it forever.
Gotcha.
Okay? Because it's not enough to deter the behavior from happening again.
Okay.
Okay? So, and there's a difference between obedience and behavior. So if we take barking out the window, for example, a lot of people call their dog, right? And they'll say, Jesse, my dog barks out the window. I call my dog, but then my dog goes right back to barking out the window. And I go, yes. I go, because nothing said don't bark out the window.
Right.
You simply said, hey, get over here. And the dog comes over and he's like, hey, what you want? My job done? I'm gonna go back to what I was doing before.
Right.
Okay, so that's the difference here. So when it comes to like the coexistence and it comes to the people coming over, that's behavioral type stuff. I want to be able to walk my dog on a leash. I want to be able to call my dog over when he's chasing a squirrel. That's obedience type stuff. Okay. And they usually, they go hand in hand, and I cover all these things. E-collar allows you to do both of these things very easily. Okay? So the first thing we always do is we teach leash walking with the e-collar first. Okay? Because one, it's the most common thing that people want to fix is leash pulling. I deal with a lot of dog reactivity cases. So heel is the reference point for addressing reactivity. E-collar is a stressor, and walking helps alleviate stress. If you put an e-collar on a dog and you press the button, you'd most likely see him kind of move around, and more often than not, dogs move away. Okay, so it makes a dog want to move. So heel is a moving behavior. So the heel command allows us to teach the dog how it turns on and how it turns off, but at the same time allows them to express their need to move in response to the collar. Okay, so the heel is like one of the most important commands whenever you're doing any kind of e-collar training. So we always start with that first. And then I see, what does it fix? Because e-collar heel can fix a lot of behaviors without even having to confront them. So let's say if I have a dog that's dog reactive, they lunge and bark at dogs, right? Most people think we come in, we pull out dogs, the dog starts barking, and we start correcting them with the e-collar and punishing them for it, when that's really not how we approach it. The first thing we always do is teach the dog what to do first and see what does it fix. Okay, so like if someone has dog reactivity and they come back week 2 and I go, what's the progress, how'd it go? And they'll say like, man, just like 60% of the reactivity is gone. Now my dog only lunges and barks at these dogs. And I go, okay, cool. So we know we got this done with what we did that one class. We're gonna make some adjustments and then see what's gonna happen when we do this approach now, right? So we play it by ear. He tells us what's working, what's not working. You know, because if I teach you something and you come back, you're like, hey Jesse, he walks like a champ, but he still always lunges at this one dog, then I go, okay, he's learned this, but he's still willing to do that. Right, so now we have to approach that differently. So heel is typically 2 classes. The first class I'm teaching you to teach him. The second class, we cover any kind of lingering behavioral stuff, and then we work on adding the word to the command, doing more kind of body language things so he knows what you're doing. Come back class 3, where we at with the behavioral stuff. You're my feedback. If for whatever reason you're struggling with something still, we would review that and then move on to the next thing. Okay, so there's like a shape, not a shape. There's like not a schedule, like a structure to the program, but it's not cookie cutter. It really, like, the first class is going to be heel for sure, but then everything that happens after that is in response to what happens after that first class. Okay, so we're just building on things. So heel would be 2 classes. By the 3rd class, I would most likely jump into either people coming over or him in Wallace. Okay, so correcting behavior is simple because it's simply don't do that. Okay, so earlier you mentioned if I have a guest come over, I want to know that he can be in a down state and not bother my guest. Okay, but that makes it more complicated. Because you have to teach the dog, 1, how to lay down. 2, to lay down for an extended period of time. 3, to lay down when people are coming over.
I guess so.
Right? Because you're telling them, do this when this happens. Right? Or the guest comes in, he's staring at the guest, and they go, don't do that. I don't care what you do, but don't do that. He barks at the guest, don't do that either. He acts really.
And I guess it's like, I don't care what he's doing as long as he's not bothering them, being, territorial and, God forbid, not nipping anybody, right? So,
correct.
Or worse. But then, and just, and again, it's like, I know what he could do at the beginning, and I don't know if he was just on his best behavior because he'd just shown up at our house and he wasn't, whatever, but it was like he literally would like kind of like he'd go over and say hi to people and then he'd lay down and go to sleep. And I don't know if it was like I'm stressed, I'm just like zoning out, but it was clear that he could do that, and I want to get back to that,
Yeah, and you're more likely to get that back because it was who he was at one time. I get dogs that, like, for instance, never liked dogs, even as puppies, and I'll tell the owner, like, I can't make this dog like dogs because it was never there in the first place. Now, if the dog was friendly and then was like attacked and then became aggressive, you're more likely to get back to friendly because it was the dog until the negative experience happened. So that's just trusting. So when it comes to the people coming over and that whole spiel, that's the easier approach. Is whenever you see tension or suspicion, you would just correct them and teach them like, hey, like, you don't need to be that.
Got it.
And at some point, he might come around to sniffing or smelling them, and going, okay, cool, you're fine, and then walking away, falling asleep on his bed or whatever. Okay. Now, it doesn't hurt to have stationary control, just in case, because we don't know if it's going to work that way. Okay, but that's how I usually approach it. Is we go with the behavioral, like let's say jumping on people. A lot of people say teach the dog to sit. If the dog sits, they can't jump on people. But if the dog really loves people, they're too excited, they don't hold the sit anyways.
Yeah.
So it's easier just to teach them not to jump in the first place,
Right.
you know? So we would cover both of those things, both the obedience and the behavioral aspect of it. So 2 classes on the heel, you should be able to walk your dog no problem. Any kind of, when you said walking past dogs and stuff, because you said his reactivity is inconsistent, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Okay.
Okay. When I get dog owners like, man, Jesse, I can't see a dog even from a block away.
Yeah.
It's going to be some work. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a pretty easy progression. So by class 3, we can jump into the behavioral stuff.
Okay.
So once you understand the concept of correcting behavior, right? So it's like, okay, my guest comes over and it's okay, don't stare at them. I just correct them.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes off and minds his business. Easy peasy. So we take the same approach we apply to Wallace, right? He's there on a leash. We create controlled context. Wallace comes in. He starts to stare. Don't stare at Wallace.
Yeah.
Right? But then we have to watch Wallace now. And let's say
Yeah.
Wallace comes over
Right.
and he's like wanting a posture. You would want to correct that. And you're teaching Wallace, don't try to posture him.
Gotcha.
Right? But we'd be really proactive about that because we don't even want to allow the tension to happen because that's a lot of risk there, right?
Right.
And then it's just reinforcing that rule.
So would it make sense for Wallace to do the e-collar thing too?
No.
Or okay.
Because could you, yes. I've trained dogs as old as 12 years old in e-collar. It's perfectly safe to use. I have a dog right now that's 8 years old on the e-collar. He doesn't look 8, but he's 8. So, you can correct Wallace without the e-collar. Okay, and I would provide you information on how to do that and how to apply it to your situation. Okay, and you can technically apply it to him as well. It just the only factor would be how do they take to the correction.
Gotcha.
Okay, do they actually respect it? Because if they don't respect it, it's not going to have any
Gotcha.
meaning, right? So I was raised old school. I was spanked. So like, if I picked on my brother, got spanked. I only talked back to my mom once growing up, so I got a really firm correction for that.
Right.
If I didn't do my homework, if I didn't do my chores, I got spanked for everything.
Yeah.
And that's what shaped me to who I am today. It's the same thing for dogs as well. Is they're all physical animals, as you can see by the nicks on his face, right? We got to his couple, and that's where they're willing to go. So here, when we step in, we're doing the e-collars. What's nice about it is that it's a physical correction at the press of a button.
Yeah.
That's not confrontational because he doesn't know where it's coming from.
Right.
Okay. However, there is some benefit to confrontation because since it is personal, the dog knows, oh, you will correct me.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need this thing on my neck in order to stop me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So like growing up, if my mom couldn't spank me with a belt, she spanked me with her hand.
Yeah.
So as long as my mom hit the hand, I knew there was sort of consequence, right? So it's the same thing for dogs. There's pluses to non-confrontational corrections, but there's also like the negatives to it, which is you become dependent on the collar, right? But then when you do corrections yourself, the negative is it is confrontational, so this average dog owner tends to feel bad, because they're like, oh, I feel like I'm hitting my dog. I'm like, you're not hitting your dog because they bite each other. It's like if we're trying to find the equivalent of spanking for a human, but applying it to a dog. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
So, it's super simple. It's simply don't do that, so that the dogs start to, when you're like present, they're like, okay, mom's around.
Yeah.
Mom doesn't play. We
Right.
just coexist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we remove you from the picture, there's going to be tension again because now there's no higher up to regulate them. Okay, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So like if anybody would ever be gone and leave the house, they would of course be separated.
Yeah.
If you're the primary like handler and trainer, and everybody else in the house just kind of lives with the dog, then I would tell them, hey, if I'm not here, put these guys away because I know you guys aren't going to reinforce anything.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So questions about this stuff so far?
No, this all makes sense.
Okay. Obedience-wise, outside of like leash walking and stuff, is there anything else that you think you might need?
He can be kind of, there are things like he's gotten in that habit of when we sit down to eat, he'll bark at us.
Oh, okay.
So stupid stuff like that, like, we just want to stop because it's really annoying.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just want to kind of not be reacting to him all the time. Like, I want him to know kind of how he's supposed to behave in that regard. Yeah.
Gotcha.
No, I mean, he's, it's really those, more like kind of aggressive, whatever stuff that I'm most concerned about. And I do think with more, like with him being more in control and walks and stuff. And I think, again, he's always better when he's more physically relaxed, like when he's gotten some of his energy out. So I think, the longer walk I can take him on, the more comfortable I am, putting him out there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, he's not bad on a leash, but he's not great. So I think, the longer, the better it is. And things like, I want to get to the point where my daughter, who's 15, I want her to be comfortable taking him for a long walk, and not worrying about what he's going to do.
Gotcha.
So, I think, well, I'll be the primary. I want there to be some involvement from her and my husband.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah,
it's kind of a transferable skill,
Yeah. So what's great about e-collar is that transference is very high. So like, let's say everybody showed up, you, your husband, your daughter, okay, and you did the first batch of training. You hand them over to your daughter or your husband, just transfers over.
Good.
Okay, as long as you do the same thing at the same number, like
Right.
e-collar, everything transfers over. It's super simple.
Yeah.
So like I remember I had a couple, and the lady was like maybe like 5 foot tall, and the boyfriend was like 6 something, 6'2", and their dog was all over the place. And she did the training first, right? So she was getting yanked all over.
Yeah.
Then we got the dog trained, and she's handing the leash to her boyfriend, and she's like laughing because she's like, good luck. And I'm like, you did all the work right now.
Yeah.
And she's like, what? I'm like, watch. And as soon as he took the leash, nothing.
Yeah.
And I was like, you actually just did everything right now. So that's also the great thing about remote collar.
Yeah.
Is like, let's say you have to go out of town and you had a friend watch or something like that, and you said like, hey, you train on this tool. This is what you do, and you coach them through it. This is a number. This is what you do when you pull. If you pull or anything like that, boom, just transfers over. Okay, super simple. And the only thing that holds people back is how high they're willing to go on the e-collar.
Yeah.
So there's 127 individual settings.
Mm.
So old school e-collars used to have only 5.
Okay.
So 5 and 127 are the same, but I have 122 more divisions now.
Gotcha.
Okay. So if 3 your dog was yelping and 2 your dog wasn't listening, you were stopped.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now 60's too high, 50's too low, 54, 55, 56. We can really fine tune it to the dog.
Okay.
So when it comes to the adherence of the command or his respect of the command, let's say his number is 45.
Yeah.
Okay. And you give the collar to your daughter, and she goes on a walk, she comes back, she's like, oh man, you're so bad. And you go, what was your number? 25.
Yeah.
Like, well, he's 45. Yeah, but I felt bad.
Yeah.
That's where we have a problem, because then he goes, oh, you only go to 25.
Honestly, she won't be the one who feels bad. It'll be my husband.
Okay. So there you go.
I mean, she's an only kid, so like, all the pets are like her siblings, and I think she doesn't have she has no interest in them being badly behaved. You know what I mean? So she's,
Gotcha.
she's sick of him being a jerk. So
Gotcha. So that's the biggest
loves
thing.
him, but tired of the behavior.
Oh, for
We all
sure.
are, so.
So that's the one thing, in this case, potentially your husband feeling bad, and that's where you're gonna get inconsistencies. Okay.
Yeah.
So as long as everybody's on the same page, it just makes things easier for everybody, because the dogs is just consistent. Dogs thrive in black and white
Yeah.
environments.
Yeah.
And when we create gray area, that's where we get to issues.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of length of time, I think you're probably around the 6 to maybe 9 class range.
Okay.
So if you did 6, it would be 2 on the heel, 1 on people coming over, 1 on like the spark of the begging essentially at the dinner table, the tension between him and Wallace, anything that you just don't want him to do.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we see how you feel about things at that point. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's easy peasy and it's making sense and everybody's on the same page, good. Then on class 5 and 6, we can teach stationary control if you like, just to have a bit more control when people come over.
Right.
Maybe you have a guest come over, maybe it's your sister and she's kind of worried of him and she's like, you know what, I'm not too comfortable with him being around because he hit me. Go over here, don't move for the next 2 hours.
Yeah.
Okay? Otherwise, the next most important thing that a dog should learn is a recall.
Yeah.
Come when called. So if you feel like him being off leash at a park is in his future, that's something we want to cover.
I'd love that. I think that would be great. But yeah.
Yeah, so recall is typically a 2-class exercise.
Okay.
So that's why I said they're between the 6 to 9.
Gotcha.
So with the 6, what I do is I really kind of bare bones it. And I cover the stuff we need first. We need the heel, we need people coming over, and we need him to coexist with Wallace.
Right.
Those are the primaries. And if we get those done in 4 classes, that leaves us 2 classes, and you want to do, recall over stationary work, then we cover recall. Okay, you call the shots, I just show up.
Gotcha.
If you're wanting a bit more control alongside the behavior, just as kind of like, you have it, you know what I'm saying, like you'd rather have it not need it, not have it type of deal, then in the 9 classes, we could cover all that stuff. We can cover the heel, the recall, the stationary control, and the behavioral stuff.
Okay.
It just gives us a bigger window to tackle things.
Great.
And then if everything's going well, I just keep teaching you more stuff. Okay, until we wrap up the program.
Sure.
But that's all personal preference. Because I don't think, like, this is not an extreme case.
Yeah.
This isn't like, it's.
Yeah, he hasn't lunched actually, so I'm really glad for that, so yeah.
Yeah, and I've been looking at him, like, there's been no tension. He's been, he's a little anxious because of the new environment, but he's, able to settle. And this level of anxiety is what I would call like a healthy level, considering the environment, but he is on medication, right? Yeah. So that can factor in.
And I mean, I don't know, I think I read a little bit about, I don't have any like urge to like necessarily pull him off the medication because I don't know what that would do. Mm-hmm. I don't like that he's medicated as much as he, again, I don't know what path that's going to take, but
yeah. So
it's one of those where I know that the medication in and of itself is not the end all be all. And,
right. So the problem with medication, and this is just my 2 cents, at the end of the day, your dog, your rules, okay, is almost all the dogs that I get in here are medicated, and they're the same, okay? One of them, the dog bit, I think it was the wife over a bone. And the vet said, oh, he's really anxious, put him on, fluoxetine or whatever. And also told them not to train with me because of e-collar. But then what happened was they went on a trip and then she's like, I'm not going to do the consultation, I want my money back. And I said, hey, it's been past 48 hours, we can't give you a refund. However, I will give you that consultation because you paid for it. So since she couldn't get her money back, she was kind of pressured into the consultation. And we had the consultation, and within 5 minutes, because I was like, an e-collar is a miniaturized tension unit. And she looked at me, she's like, are you serious? And I said, yeah. She's like, I'm a physical therapist. She's like, I use it on people all the time.
Yeah.
And she said, my veterinarian told me I was electrocuting my dog. And I said, well, your veterinarian's an idiot, because that's not what it is. And the dog, was drugged on fluoxetine. And I said, resource guarding is a primal instinct. Mm-hmm. A dog does not know that when you give them something, it's something that you're giving that you may take back. So medication has no place here because it's just a natural instinct the dog has.
Right.
So, we took the dog off the medication and we fixed all the resource guarding issues. But unfortunately, veterinarians throw medication at everything.
Sure.
And the only time I've ever seen a medication help was actually a dog that did get very anxious in the car. It was nothing that could be trained. But they gave the client something that essentially just put the dog to sleep while they would go on road trips because they would travel to Michigan. Yeah. And they asked me, they're like, how do you feel about it? I'm like, honestly, we can't train it out of the dog. Yeah. It's just, it is what it is. Yeah. The medication helped knock your dog out so that the dog didn't feel like crap for 4 hours on a long trip to Michigan and prevented the vomiting. Yeah. So I'm like, it sounds like that's the solution here.
Right.
So that's my 2 cents on it. Unfortunately, like my girlfriend's dog is a nervous dog, and she's great here. She comes to daycare. She's fine with all the handlers. She's fine with people and stuff, but then when she went to the vet because of COVID, they had to take her in by herself. Mm-hmm. She got a little defensive, and then right away they were like, oh, we got to put your dog on fluoxetine. She's like, why? And they're like, she's like, it's a veterinary clinic. She was unsure. Right. It has nothing to do with the dog, being anxious or whatever. Yeah. So, in my opinion, you don't need it. How would you choose to do with it, of course, is your decision. We have a dog right now whose name is Doug, who is an extreme case, who was on 3 types of drugs. And he was on 3 types of drugs when they came for the consult. And he was still trying to attack me. So I was like, how exactly is this helping?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, when it comes to all this stuff, it's just discipline. Mm-hmm. He hasn't been bitten, so to speak, for his behaviors.
Right.
And that's why these things happen, so like between the tension between him and Wallace, it escalated the physicality, but it's unresolved, right? Because remember, dogs will go to the point of killing another dog,
Yeah.
right? So that can stay constant tension until you step in with physicality and you go, nope, you're not going to do that, and Wallace, you're not going to do that either.
Right.
And they go, oh wow. So you're biting them before they can bite each other. That's
Gotcha.
how that works.
Yeah.
Okay. So, questions about any of this stuff though so far?
No, that makes sense. I mean, I think it's one of those where, if we could get to the point where you're not medicated, that would probably be better for you, Bob, because you've got a sensitive system as it stands.
Sure.
I mean, the pancreatitis thing's never gone away, so I don't know that pumping him full of drugs is a particularly great thing for his digestive tract anyway, so.
Sure.
I mean, that's kind of like, you can keep him on it, we can try and taper him off, I mean, they're very they didn't, he came to us with taking this stuff and they didn't.
Oh, with medication?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I think that, the stuff was because he was in pretty severe pancreatitis, having an actual attack. I mean, we're really lucky we haven't had any issues with him, but we're also super careful about what he ever gets in his mouth.
Sure.
But, we know we have to be worried about his health. And so I just generally want to make sure I'm not, making that harder for him to do it. But yeah, I don't love that he's on the meds, and I don't know that it changes. That it's changed much in terms of him, being a weirdo, and also the thing is, he was also 55 pounds when we first adopted him, and he's 72 now.
Oh yeah.
So
I see, yeah.
he's on the same basic amount. So I don't even know that it makes sense because he's literally 30% more dog.
Bigger, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of questions we have about that, and that was one of the things that's after we get through all this COVID crap, let's talk about kind of where he is on that.
Yeah, so when it comes to the social before COVID and then kind of change afterwards is completely normal.
Yeah.
It happened with a lot of dogs. And when I heard of quarantine, I knew I was like, man,
I'm gonna be really busy.
Separation anxiety, because people are working
And he
from home.
definitely has that. It's to the point where, that's the other thing. Again, I think behaviorally, if he's feeling more comfortable, maybe that'll do with it. I can't believe I didn't mention that. He follows me around. It's kind of like having a 2-year-old. I don't go to the bathroom by myself. A lot of times he wants to be constantly with me. Again, this morning I thought it was good. My sister was on the couch, we were talking. He was in the room with us. I got up to make coffee. He didn't follow me in the kitchen, which was, he just kind of was sacked out and didn't move. That's actually pretty unusual for him. Usually if I get up, he gets up. If I leave the room, he wants to leave the room. If I leave the house, he whines, with my husband. He'll settle down, but, if he thinks he hears my car, it's, very exciting stuff. So he has definitely got lots of separation anxiety issues.
Is he ever left unattended completely? Is he ever left alone completely?
Yes, we will leave him alone. Again, you can't crate him, so he has free roam in kind of the back of the house. We leave him out with our female. Nellie she's about 8 years old. She's a hound. They get along great, and she's kind of like the babysitter. If she's out with him, he's fine. I have to make sure there's nothing out on the counter in the kitchen because he'll get bored and but he's generally fine, and they seem to get along great. I had a camera for a while to watch what they did. So he was good. So he will be okay, but it's if I don't leave him out with her, what will happen within a couple minutes is he'll pee on the floor, and then he whines, and then he gets destructive, and it's literally just an escalation of a freak out. So getting to the point where maybe we work on that is another thing. Behaviorally that's kind of a big thing too. Again, that's kind of been secondary because of the snapping stuff that happened. But again, he's definitely, and again, he's on all this medication and he's still doing this. So again, that's not going to cover, that's not going to snap him out of that.
Yeah, because what happens is stress levels can override the drug.
Yeah.
So I had to go with a client who gets very defensive at the veterinarian. So I went there with him to control the dog essentially because they needed to get him shots and everything. And he showed up on 4 to 5 kills of something. He was drooling. He was like this, right? We bring him in the room. As soon as they came in, he started growling at them. You know, I got him under control. They sedated him. They came back 20 minutes later. They went to pick him up. He woke up, became aggressive. They had to sedate him some more. And I think there was a third sedation before that he finally just calmed out. And actually, when we picked him up, he still growled.
Wow.
He just didn't get up.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had another client whose dog went to the vet, and the vet told him to give the dog enough a sedative for a rhino, and the dog was still bucking around and fighting.
Oh my God.
So that's the power of dog and like primal instinct.
Yeah.
So when it comes to separation anxiety stuff, that's also difficult to fix in the sense that it happens when you're gone.
Yeah.
So if that's something you want to cover within the classes, then you definitely want to be more within that 9-week range.
Yeah, I think we're definitely looking at that no matter what.
Yeah,
I just feel like the more we can reinforce this stuff too, the better, so.
Yeah, what would most likely happen is, so you drive?
Mm-hmm.
You go on the expressway?
Mm-hmm.
You go speed limit?
No. Only if I have to.
Most people don't go speed limit.
Right.
Yeah, it's because that's called opportunistic behavior. And then when we see a squad car, we slow down. You don't want to get a ticket, right? There's the consequence there. So when it comes to leaving the dog unattended and the barking or the whining that may happen, is there's a bark collar. It's like an e-collar, but it goes off when the dog whines and or barks.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is it lets the dog know you can still be corrected.
Mm-hmm.
So it keeps them in check.
Gotcha.
So that we don't see an escalation of behavior. Okay, so like we had a dog that came here end of 2019 in Mason for a rescue, who would literally sound like he was dying if you crated him. Okay. And for me, it was like I think it took me a day to fix that problem. And he was an extreme case for sure. And if you put him with the bar collar, he'd go in the kennel, curl into a donut, and just go to sleep. If you put him without the bar collar, he'd go in the kennel and he'd start like salivating and panting and like kind of nipping at the bars.
Yeah.
Because he knew that when the collar was on, there was threat of consequence. So it didn't even allow him to escalate to an anxious state.
Yeah.
And for him, he needed that.
Yeah.
As long as he had the collar on, he was good. He'd go in there, he'd sleep, he'd wake up, no problem, go back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
If he didn't have it on, he'd have a problem. Okay?
Yeah.
So some dogs progress past it.
Yeah.
Some dogs need it. It's kind of like the medication, except it actually can stop the dog from escalating because it's threat of consequence.
Yeah.
So for humans, because they usually think like, well, how does that work? They're like, that you can correct anxiety. I'm like, because you can't communicate to a dog like a human.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, hey, it's okay to be anxious, like this is gonna happen and blah, 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 and you can explain it to them logically.
Right.
For dogs though, they don't have that.
Yeah.
Right? So another dog would just correct the dog for being anxious.
Yeah.
There is no conversation of, hey buddy, like it's okay, mom and dad are coming back, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So, that's just kind of played by ear.
Yeah, I know.
To see how he does.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If
the thing is, I don't care if he doesn't crave, if he doesn't, as long as he's able to be okay with Nellie, that's fine for now, but I mean, she's 8, she's not gonna be around forever.
That's my thing.
I think, we've got a while here, but this is not a forever thing, and, who knows what our next dog situation's gonna be, and,
Yeah, because that was my thinking too, right? I'm like, okay, 8-year-old dog, 4.5-year-old dog.
Yeah.
And unfortunately shit can happen.
Yeah.
Right? So then it becomes, if that were to happen, which I hope it doesn't, and then it's like, oh crap, now we gotta just like spearhead this problem.
Yeah, because we'll never be able to leave.
Yeah. So I don't care about the crate training. If he can be in the house alone with like a bar collar and just be chill, cool, we found the solution.
Totally. Because I do think, and again, maybe I'm overthinking it, but I do think he's got some bad associations with crates.
He could. I mean, he was back there
crappy
for 2 years.
Yeah. Now, I will say it's weird. We have a crate up in our bedroom because Wallace usually sleeps like kind of out in the sitting room area, but and he's in the crate.
Mm-hmm.
And he sleeps on the floor in our bedroom, like on a bed. And lately you've been thinking it's really fun to go in the crate and hang out. And I think you might be just messing with Wallace because it's like, this is his space and I'm going in here.
Oh,
but
sure.
he's curious, and it's like, and so he will, on his own, go in the crate, lay down, and like sack out for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's not as freaky of a place for him as I think it is. So
Well, the
I
other
would
thing
love, I mean, it makes life easy if you can put him in a crate, even if it's like I wash him and he's wet and I want to run around the house. It's nice if I can throw him in a crate for half an hour until he's dry.
Right. The other thing is that he can go in and out willingly.
Yeah,
It's when you close that gate that it becomes a problem.
exactly.
Yeah. So I don't think crate training is an absolute must. I think it's just like leave him alone, put something on him. How does he do?
Yeah, I would just like to not have him like, destroy my couch.
Exactly. And if that works, then perfect. We got a solution in case something happens. Although if we leave him unattended and he doesn't bark, he might still tear up the couch, right? Because that's the problem.
Right.
So then it becomes, okay, now we have to crate train, which becomes another whole host of problems, right? So it's kind of going back to earlier when I said, like, it's simpler to just say don't do that than it is to train the skill.
Totally.
Because the easy thing is, hey buddy, just don't whine and bark, don't tear up stuff, right? But then if he does, now we have to do the work of crate training, which is gonna be another process.
Yeah.
So it's really just play by ear and see what happens. So you're in the 6 to 9 week range, definitely 9 if you want to cover the separation anxiety as well.
So, yeah.
In terms of the collar, he needs a big boy collar. It's meant for 70 pounds and over.
Okay.
It's the best collar there is. It's the best collar there is. And it runs about $325-ish, I think, with tax. That might be an overestimate. It's a 1 mile range, fully waterproof system, so he can go swimming in it. The remote is also waterproof as well.
Okay. And does he wear it all the time? Is it like
no, only when you need it.
Okay.
So when it comes to the e-collar, it's when you need it. So going back to my cop example earlier, think of the e-collar as a cop on a collar.
Mm-hmm.
When it's present, he's going to behave himself. So when you take him out on walks, if you were to be off leash at the park, when guests come over, when Wallace is going to be around and they're going to be coexisting, your collar will be on.
Okay.
If he's a great dog otherwise, collar is off.
Gotcha.
Maybe when you leave him home all alone, unattended, bark collar is on.
Yeah.
But then when you come back, bark collar is off.
Okay.
So it's there just in case you need it.
Gotcha.
So when it comes to opportunistic behavior, even as humans, and we know better, we still push things, right? It's part of survival instinct. All animals do it. So he'll learn, when that collar is present, there's threat of consequence, and when the collar is not present, there's no threat of consequence. So he will learn that he can kind of push things or not be consistent in his behavior when it's not present. It's nothing good or bad, it's just the way it is. It has nothing to do with my skills as a trainer or anything like that. It's just, if you can get away with it, then why not?
Yeah.
Okay? So, but it's not that you're always having to use it. If you do your training and you follow through consistently, it's just present. And then you use it if needed. Because things can happen. Someone can like startle him, or you can have an off-leash dog charge you on the street. There's a lot of stuff that can happen.
That's happened, yeah.
So it's even in the case of an emergency, it still allows you to have or you to regain control.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Other questions?
No, I think that's good. Are you like, do you have openings now, or?
So that's something that Maria would go over with you.
Okay.
So most people like 9 to 5 again. That my evenings and weekends are super busy.
I work for myself, so my schedule is very open.
Okay, cool. So it's easier to get you more. It's much easier to get you in like during the daytime.
Right.
But even then, my time to filling up, Maria would get you all situated with that.
The one question I do have, because I noticed that you guys also do daycare and stuff like that. I mean, does it make sense to have him, here? I mean, I like where he goes now, but I don't know if it's more reinforcing of the stuff he's learning to be here. I mean, we're open to switching, and if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So
no problem,
the differences would be we're more structured here. We do smaller groups as is. We do about 8 to 12 dogs instead of like 30 to 50 dogs.
Yeah.
I have a new employee coming in today that says it's her and one other employee to handle 50 to 70 dogs.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
We do treadmill here. We reinforce training, so he would show up with his collar and everything. We would do all that stuff with him.
Yeah.
We do duration work as well, so like the go here and don't move type stuff.
Yeah.
And there's dogs training, there's puppies playing, there's other dogs playing, there's dogs on the treadmill, and he's learning just to be there and be chill with all that going on.
Yeah.
So it's just a bit more structured. It's really just personal preference.
Yeah.
Because people ask that, like, you know, is my daycare working against me? And in some cases, yes. I don't think this is a case where it is. Because you said they do a lot of different things with him throughout the day. He does treadmill, he does his play groups, he does.
And again, I think it's, you know, I think it depends on who's working there. Who, you know, like he's got a couple there who really like him, and then that I think, you know, when they're not super busy, they give him a lot of extra attention.
More time.
But it's a little more, you know, I think it's a little more hit or miss. So, you know.
Yeah. So if you like the training to be consistent, then it would make it make sense to bring him here.
Okay.
Otherwise, if you start the training and he's doing great at daycare, there's no need to.
Okay.
You know, I get some dogs that can only come here.
Yeah, I bet.
You know, and but otherwise, my whole thing is if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Sure.
Other questions?
No, I think that makes sense.
Okay,
What
so
do you
then
think,
Maria would reach out.
Okay.
She'll get in contact with you. Otherwise, if you know you'd like to get started, you can also email her.
Yeah, I will.
Just to get ahead of things a bit.
Great.
And then she'll provide you with the information for the caller.
Great.
She'll provide you with the pricing for the 6 and 9 program.
Okay.
And then, you know, just depending on your availability versus mine, maybe a little bit of a wait. We've also started meeting at where did you come from?
We're in Ravenswood, but yeah, I saw Oz Park.
Yeah, we do Oz Park. So Oz Park is super busy. There's a lot of people, dogs, rollerbladers, skateboarders, strollers, parties, baseball games and stuff going on. So it's a nice place to practice.
Yeah.
But because of COVID, we had to change how we operate. Now I still do home to home.
Okay.
However, that's at a higher rate.
Gotcha.
Because now it's going to pull me from what I do now.
Yeah.
So now almost all my clients travel to me. I only have a couple that I travel to.
Gotcha.
So just for your information, if you did the in-person like the Oz Park, when it comes to like the people coming over, which requires training in the home, I would send my trainer Enrique.
Okay.
Okay, he's solid. He's been doing all my in-home visits.
Okay.
He just did one on Thursday for the exact problem that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So he would handle that, and that's at the same rate as my in Oz Park rate. So you're not paying anything extra for that as long as you're within the city, which you're in Ravenswood, so you're fine.
Yeah.
And so once we get to that third class, I would put you in contact with Enrique,
Okay.
and he would handle that class for you.
Gotcha.
And if you needed to handle something else within the home, I would send him out to you again. Okay.
Cool.
Otherwise, all the obedience stuff, the healing, the recall stuff, the stationary stuff, all that we can cover out at Oz Park with all the distractions, so you know how to.
It's a real life experience, yeah.
Yeah, and people love it because they're able to get those results
Yeah.
in that kind of environment, so it makes everything easier for them.
You're fine, stop whining.
But other than that, you know, we'll just play it by ear and see how everything else works out.
Okay, sounds great. Thank
Anything
you
else?
very much. No, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
No worries. So if you have any other questions, you let us know,
Will do.
and then Maria will get in contact with you, or you can of course contact her, and then she'll get you all set up.
Okay, great.